All right, welcome to another episode of Comic Book Squares. We got another great one today. My name's Shane.
I'm Carrie.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Mike. Let's get this show started.
All right, well, welcome to another episode of Comic Book Squares. This is going to be a really, really fun one. Paul discovered a really beautiful book called Plague Seeker. Tell us a little bit about it, Paul.
Yeah, obviously we've been kind of chatting about it. This is one of those books that, really just jumps out at you literally from the cover. It's from a publishing company called Bad Egg. Never heard of them before, but obviously the book, the artwork jumped right out. We found it on Global Comics, so it's really accessible for anybody that'd like to hop on and subscribe. Again, this is a book that just jumped out from the artwork, but as you read in, it really has a great narrative, and that's what's kind of unique about it. There's no true dialogue from any of the characters in the book. It's strictly a narrative. Who's telling that story? We have no idea. When they're telling it, when this happened, there's really no context. It just literally starts off from the front page. There's some type of apocalypse. It just starts out with the words "then," and then everything changes. Some kind of apocalyptic event happens. They call it the Calamity. Everything changes literally in the blink of an eye, and there are just these horrifying creatures, sort of, zombie demon-esque type creatures just roaming the planet, just randomly creating, mass mayhem and carnage. So it was right up our alley, necessarily, and we thought, what an uplifting type of book. No, we thought it was fantastic, but obviously we'll get into more detail here with the crew. So what did you guys think?
Gary?
What I wrote down was the art style used in it is beautiful, just really well done, and short and sweet. I just wrote down scary, but I was intrigued. Like it was a scary little comic, but I was left with but I need to know more.
Yeah, right. Do you want to know more?
Yeah.
Where's that from?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. Starship Troopers. Yeah.
Starship Troopers. Would you like to know more?
Yes.
Yeah, you know what? And I'm glad you brought that up, Carrie, because one of the things that the cover sort of jumped out, but as I read and as you get more and more, as you keep turning the pages, you keep thinking, boy, what's coming next? What's coming next? And just at the artwork, I don't know if it seemed to get better as the book went along, but it was like further down like the horror rabbit hole, which I was totally on board with that. And kind of the thought that came to my mind was the art really reminded me of kind of like a Bernie Wrightson and Martin Simmons from Department of Truth and some other titles that he's done. But, if you're a comic fan and you don't know who Bernie Wrightson is, Google that quick and get on board, because his stuff was fantastic, starting from, late 70s, 80s for quite a while.
The piece he did on Frankenstein is beautiful.
Yes. Swamp Thing, all that stuff. He literally, changed the direction of some of the artwork, his attention to detail. And that's what I found with this book. Usually with these horror books, they can kind of, they figure, just throw some blood on the page and they can be a little, they can be a little less detail oriented. But this was extremely detail oriented, which I appreciated, including the background. They didn't skimp on any part of the panel.
Yeah, I would agree. And what I think is, this isn't even what I would call traditional comic book art at all. This is, when I was looking at this, I felt like I was in an art gallery. Every panel is just filled with detail, and it is a dark piece. There's definitely some blood and some horrific elements, but it's still done in such just a beautiful, beautiful way. It's an amazing piece. I love it.
It reminded me of Geiger's work. The guy did Alien art, all that stuff. It reminded me a lot of like Geiger's artwork, which is he was amazing at creating horrific beauty. And that's what kind of this is. It's like this horror, but it's so fascinating and beautiful to look at. But you're like, oh, well, that's ribs cracking open and you know,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. Oh, that's, but it's so pretty.
Yeah. It looks beautiful.
It looks beautiful.
Well,
Well done.
yeah, the book, for me, agree with everyone's statements. And I don't want to say it's a complete opposite of comic books, because I think a comic book is there to tell a good story and illustrate a good story combined, right? But in this case, I don't think there's as many words that are necessary, to Shane's point, you know, being a narrative and not having like so much dialogue, because the images and because they are so detailed and beautiful, it draws you in. So like it just takes you there. And so the words are there to kind of give some context, as Paul mentioned, you know, the calamity and these plagues grew out of that calamity. I think there's 8 of them or something. And then the plague seeker, the title of the book, is about a special entity that is also created at that time. And so it starts to tell the story of how their their paths are intertwined in some ways, but it's, you know, it doesn't definitely tell you everything. Like there is a lot of unknowns, that world building piece that we always talk about. Like to Paul's point, you know, we're not sure when it's happening or where or who's telling the story, but it's just such a beautiful, the imagery that takes you on this journey is just beautiful. And so, yeah, definitely, I think dark and kind of horror-esque, but just done in such a beautiful fashion. To repeat, I guess, what everyone else has been saying, it is something that just is kind of stands apart in that fashion. Not that other books aren't illustrated well. This style, though, is very very different and very beautiful.
One thing I really like, so this, just for the listeners and viewers to know, this is issue 0, if you will. So it's like that introduction to the world. And that's what's on Global Comics right now is issue 0. But what's kind of cool is, so they give you this, you know, the comic, and then they finish it up with the journal of the plague years.
Oh,
and
right.
so like you're reading through like somebody because from what the way I gathered it, at least in the series, in the artwork side of it, the comic side was that, you know, the story is picking up like almost 1,000 years after all this calamity happens. And so then when they finish it up with the special part of it, which is the journal of the plague years, you're getting to read about like the beginning of the plague and all that. So they show you really quickly in the panels in the first part, but then that also gives you a little more background on what was happening and stuff. So I really appreciated that. It was like 2 different ways to tell the story all in one book.
And there's a
That's
little
super.
wordplay in there too, or at least, I mean, to look at it, episode 0, patient 0 inside of plagues, right? So this is
Right.
where it starts.
That's true.
This is the one you need to
That was
pay
awesome.
attention to.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
like as you guys continue to talk, what I keep seeing meshed, just to bring it into what people might already know, is like a humanoid xenomorph gives birth to the Witcher. like that's
interesting.
Witcher. Oh,
like
I
it
love
really-
that. That's a good.
like that's what I keep seeing. And even in the artistry, this plague seeker looks like the Witcher. Like when I saw, I was like, oh, it's the Witcher. It's
Right.
Henry
A
Cavill.
little bit, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You know what? I see that now. You know,
That's cool.
I you know
Gosh,
what? You know, usually, not for the entire issue, but you know, there's a lot of there's sparing use of color, right? Obviously, red is the big one. And, you know, and there's a couple of series that the big 2 have come out with now called, you know, Black, White, and Blood Red, where they're black and white issues just splashed with some red, where, you know, that would be desired, which is kind of an interesting way of telling a story. Obviously, you know, we like to see full color, but you know, in this case, you know, this reminds me of kind of like, you know, those horror books of the 70s and 80s where, you know, as, you know, when they got away from like the EC stuff of the 50s and stuff, you know, and it looked less and less, what you might call comic booky. It started really started taking on a more realistic approach. This kind of took me back to that, like, somebody did their horror, homework, because like Carrie said, it's like you kept reading it, you're like, how much more like intensely bloody is this going to get? Because you think of all like the horror movies have been over the years and stuff, and you're kind of like, again, it's the shock value, right? But this, it seemed to like serve the story. Like nothing seemed gratuitous. It made sense as it went along. Like it was a good narrative. And again, and we haven't gone down the rabbit hole and seen if there have been further issues of this yet. Obviously, this was our first attempt at reviewing this specific piece of work. But again, you look at a bunch of creators that kind of swung for the fence, and I thought they did a really great job because, like Carrie said, it really jumped out. You're kind of like, wow, it's hard to get a jump scare in a comic book, but when you turn a page and somebody's being like eviscerated, like right in half, you're like, oh well, I'm glad I wasn't eating my lasagna at this point.
I know. I would see something and I'd be like, I'm probably going to dream about that. I'm going to have a nightmare. It's cool. Thank you. Thanks, subconscious. Thanks,
That's
illustrator.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, Paul, for suggesting.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Paul.
Yeah.
Well,
Thanks,
I mean, I just wanted to thank you so much, Ben, for bringing up that this was episode 0. I think that's important to note. And I didn't even really realize that until you just mentioned it. So the fact that the dialogue essentially is fairly light in here, and this is more just we're establishing what the world is to kick things off, I would assume, with issue 1. That makes a lot more sense now, for sure. Yeah, because it's definitely it's more artwork heavy than any story, essentially. I would say.
It reminded me of Arc in that way. We reviewed Arc a while back, but it reminded me of it in that way, that first issue of Arc, where it was a lot of the exposition, the world building and stuff, but with just a lot of beautiful, grotesque artwork.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I was reading this, and I know it's from Bad Egg, but as soon as I was reading, I didn't see the publisher at the beginning. I thought it was like Source Point Press or something, because they're like one of the good like horror. They do a lot of great horror comics. And so, I mean, that just speaks to the quality of this smaller. I mean, Source Point Press is kind of small too, still, but it just speaks to the quality of what these folks are trying to churn out from the get go with this book. I really thought it was from an established publisher.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
one thing I'll say is that the cover artist, I think his name is Ben Templesmith. I don't want to get that wrong, but I think it's Ben Templesmith. He's kind of the horror genre type of creator. He's done some things for heavy metal and some of the other type of. He has done a Source Point Press cover. I think I don't know if he's done. I didn't know if he did the interior, but I mean, obviously, like I mentioned, the cover really jumps out. Again, it's one of those books that could really get lost on the shelf. I don't think it's in print. I don't know that it's made it to any local comic shops, which is kind of a shame. This is one of those books that even if it's a one shot or it's a series they're going to continue, this is something that I would keep picking up at least through the first arc and see where it goes. But it doesn't look like there's been another issue of it, which hopefully the creators are maybe working on something. Maybe another title or something like that, because they definitely have a synergy. I think, even if they stick with the narrative way, the narrative approach, which I think to tell a story like this, you can do that. To your point, Ben, the sort of the end of the story where they get into the actual like written account, it looks like a diary. What I kind of liked was it seemed like maybe it was a hospital security guard. He shows up and people were in like mid-surgery and they were just abandoned, and somehow they're being kept alive by the machine still running or something. I was like, holy, I'm like, wow, okay. Evil Dead didn't even go there. Walking Dead didn't even go there. It's like, man, that's crazy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for me, I mean, I was so impressed with this artist. I this is one of those times where I would write the name down, and if they're at a convention, I would seek them out to, see if they're doing any sketches just to bring my sketchbook with and have them put a piece of their artwork in there for sure.
Have them do your family sketch
Yes,
with all you guys in this style.
in the horrible,
In the plague
nightmare
style.
plague style.
Merry Christmas from the Walsh family.
Merry Christmas.
More like Merry Deathmas.
Yeah, exactly. That's too good. Well, I mean, yeah, I think this was an amazing find. I hope people seek this one out. Once again, we mentioned before, it's available on Global Comics. They're big fans of the show, and we support them. So, yeah, please check this one out. It's an amazing piece. Well, thanks for tuning in. This was another fantastic find. Thanks, Paul, for that. And be sure to check out Global Comics to read it online. Please hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell so we can keep bringing you content like this. And we'll see you on the next one.
Take care.
Bye.